Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Rob Spaulding on the line, and he's Executive Director of the Christian Center Rescue Ministries. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, Rob, I'm excited to have you on the show today, of course, to talk about the Christian Center Rescue Ministries, but also to talk about your concept of collaboration and really how you're using collaboration, towards ending homelessness. So great topic. And I think we're going to get a lot out of it today. To get this episode started, we'll start this one like we do them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So, Rob, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Rob, what mission matters to you?
Yeah, for us, the mission that matters to us and matters to me personally is just changing the face of homelessness, just working with that population to begin moving them into a better, fuller, safer lives. The approach that we take, Adam, is that we can't do this alone. There are lots of organizations doing great work, but what we find is that organizations find themselves in silos and they just want to do that work on their own. And what we've discovered is that working collaboratively is really the key to success in moving people out of homelessness. So that's the mission that matters to me.
It's awesome. Love bringing mission-based individuals and organizations on the show to really share about why they do what they do, like what excites them, what gets them motivated to go out there and to make a difference. So awesome having you on. And just to get this kicked off, let's go a little bit further into your background. Like, where did this start? Like this calling to really want to work with the homeless population?
Yeah. Well, one for me, it started very early, and that is that I grew up in a family where, helping our neighbor, helping our fellow person was very important. And that was just something that was just embedded in us, in our family, and it's kind of in our DNA as a family. Mm-hmm. And then as I got into my career, I got into college and things like that, and I got into finance. I became an accountant, then a financial director and some other things. But I've always had a passion to help those populations, and I would help them do taxes or things like that. But that just led me more to wanting to dive a little deeper. And so as my career progressed, I was a chief financial officer in healthcare. I then moved on to the church world, and I worked in the church world for a while, where I began leading missions trips out to New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, to work inner city, working with people, boots on the ground, people who are homeless, but also working with organizations that worked with that population as well. So I just really developed a real passion for that. We did that every summer, sometimes several times a year. We'd lead teams out to large cities to work with the homeless population. And then I volunteered at the shelter here in my own community. And as time went by, I was a volunteer there. And ultimately, the previous director left. They offered me the job. I said, there's no way. I'm not called to lead which are famous last words. And as different things happened, and a chance meeting with a homeless gentleman sitting on a curb, hearing his story, I realized that this is probably what I'd been prepared for all these years. So I love doing it.
Yeah. What an amazing story. And I didn't know we had some of this volunteering in common. So for people out there, so there was a program I know in the past, like volunteering to do taxes. So I remember doing that when I first got out of college, earned income tax credit program off the top of my head. I could be wrong on the name of it. But yeah, there's lots of different ways to get involved. And so the reason I bring that up, by the way, is because, I feel like everybody has something to give, like whether you're working with the homeless population, whether you're working with something else, whether your gift is numbers or otherwise. So I was a finance guy too, and I didn't really have any specific like calling or direction. And, I got this opportunity to volunteer to do taxes. And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. Like that's a skill set I have. I can help people in need with that. So that wouldn't be what you would think. So I think the way that we sometimes define giving back or helping or things like this, I just think there's a lot of opportunity to do things that we may not even know exist.
Absolutely. And we have a tendency to lean into what our wheelhouse is. So as a finance person, to me, somebody said, hey, we need help doing taxes. And I'm like, great, count me in. But it was that, I think for me, it was a desire to move beyond that. It was a desire to kind of grow beyond that and maybe get outside of my comfort zone and just see where I was called and what I might be good at there as well.
Yeah. What would you say to some of those, let's just say, individuals that'll be watching this, that they're, let's say, in these kind of traditional professions, and maybe they've been, they've been possibly good check writers in the past, right? Different ways to give back, and any way you give back, I'm all for. I'm not saying that you have to do
Sure.
one thing versus another, but maybe some people have written the check but haven't necessarily made the commitment of time or other things if they had it.
Right.
What would be some of the things that you would tell them that maybe you found gratifying out of actually, going in there and doing the work, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things is sharing your treasures and your skills and everything beyond, maybe what your comfort is, or like you said, writing a check. And that's always great. Nonprofits always need money. But, I'll tell you that when the pandemic began, an interesting thing happened, and that is people who, people who traditionally would donate to us would donate, but people who didn't would reach out and say they saw the volume of people we were feeding. Overnight, we saw about a 250% increase in the number of people we were feeding. So it got crazy, and people identified this right away without us necessarily reaching out. And so I got a call from a friend who said, "Hey, my neighborhood, I just passed out flyers. My neighborhood's going to do a food drive for you guys." And then somebody in kind of a neighboring neighborhood found out that we were doing a food drive for you. So they're going to do a food drive. And it was just people doing what they could, kind of where they are with what they had available to them. And despite this, a pandemic and everything and all the uncertainty there on the front end of that, or in early 2020 in particular, people were finding a way. They were figuring out a way. People who had lost their jobs and did not have the financial resources were doing what they could. They were doing clothing drives and food drives, and they were asking the people they knew that had resources to give. And so there's a lot of different ways. So for some people, that's baking cookies or to use, or baking bread, or, we had some farmers who said, we really can't do a lot financially, but our chickens are really producing eggs right now. And they brought eggs, and it's the way it creates a community, actually.
It's an amazing story. Amazing story. I want to take you back to, if you remember, like that moment that you decided to take on that executive director role. Like what were you thinking? Because that's a big step. That's from like dipping your toe in the water, or you were doing a lot already with ministries and things. So maybe you were waist deep, but this one was like taking the plunge. Like what was that like?
Comparatively speaking, and it wasn't a whole lot waist deep. It was, compared to what I was doing as a volunteer to what I do as an executive director, pretty dramatically different. But for me, what I had done, I was volunteering. The previous director left. They talked to me about it. I said, I'm not really necessarily that interested. I know that there's the right person out there, but I did accept that I would be the interim. And during that time, there was a gentleman who had been a resident here at at the Christian Center a few years back, and then he was a resident under my interimship. And one of the things is that I just kind of observed the way that things were being done, and I felt like there was very loose rules and things. So I was kind of like the law and order guy to kind of bring order to the dorms, and that we have a community dining room that serves the public, and he was just observing that how different it was in that environment between those two things. And I had already turned the job down a time or two, and my wife and I were planning to take a role in another state. But it was one of those things that, it was God working on me. And this gentleman's name was Dave Nolan, and he was a great guy, he's an amazing guy, and became one of my good friends. And we lost him a few years ago, but he just spoke a lot of wisdom into that, about how the things that are needed to move somebody out of living in a shelter, and how those things had begun to happen. And, I could have just, I thought, oh man, I think maybe I'm being called to do this after all. And, because I don't come from the side, a lot of people who get into this kind of work, they come from an addiction side or something like that. And I was just a businessman and knew how to make things happen. And so after meeting with him and having this conversation with him, I went home and I told my wife, I said, maybe I'm being called to do this. And so the following week, some board members came to me and said, "Are you sure you won't take this job? We think you'd be great." And I said, let's talk. Maybe I should. So, and that was 7 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. What a story. And what a wife for supporting you. Amazing.
Right? Yeah. My wife, Lisa, she's a good one.
So I want to start peeling back on the power of collaboration and what that means to any homelessness. But I think to start that part of the discussion, like we should probably start with just collaboration, what it means, because
Hmm.
in the business sense and in the business world, for your background, my background, I feel like that concept is, has different meanings, and it's pretty common though. And translating that into the nonprofit, I mean, I see a ton of similarities, right?
Right. Right. Well, for me, what I see in the business side, when I worked in more of a business environment,
Hmm.
what we really identified was that, how do you work together to serve people better, but ideally in a way that everyone wins and, both organizations or multiple organizations are strengthened. But often the focus is more on that company's bottom line or the company's shared successes.
Yeah.
And I think in this not-for-profit environment, what we're seeing is, at least as it applies to homelessness, I think, is we're looking at everybody sort of works with this population in different ways. And so the key is that we believed in, what is the role that you play in that? And how do we line those dominoes up in a fashion that we can move somebody who is sleeping under a bridge to being in a home with a job, their addictions addressed, maybe their mental health addressed or whatever. And how do we do that in a systematic way that all the organizations can, I don't want to say benefit, but all the organizations benefit. We all meet a shared goal. And and as as I spoke in the green room, for us, it'd be great if we could be so good at this, we put ourselves out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that would be the ultimate goal. And looking at,
yes,
again, this kind of the analogy between business and the non-for-profit side. I mean, when we're talking about is resources, right? Like
Yep.
resources and stakeholders. So
Right.
whether you're talking about at a company, not duplicating the effort of one department in another department, or
Absolutely.
if you're because you don't want to use resources, incorrectly. And when you think about stakeholders, I mean, we're kind of going down the line of the same company, right? We have department heads. We have different people, we have budgets, we have people that, each department and or person answers to. That's where the power of collaboration in business for a well-functioning company or ecosystem works well. So to me, it's kind of the same thing on the nonprofit side. And maybe the end result isn't always like the bottom line, or like, as you mentioned, like the money part of it, but it is the objective in this case of ending homelessness. Am I off on this? Am I understanding?
No. I think you're absolutely correct, Adam. I think one of the things that I think is really important is that not every organization does everything well. And so what is your strength, and how does your strength come to the table in order to kind of change the whole environment?
We don't want the accounting department doing marketing or vice versa.
That's exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing? Like, if you're the marketing and creatives, then we probably don't want you managing the books, possibly.
That's correct. And for us, it means not duplicating services that somebody else does well.
Yeah.
And I think it goes beyond as you bring in some of your external partners, but it's first and foremost is you find a partner that does something really well and you partner with them to do that piece. And then you do that in a way that becomes part of that system of success. And, one of those things that we talk a lot about is, who's funding different not-for-profits or different things. And so one of the things that we really have talked about is, how does your community foundation, how does your United Way, how do your organizations that donate, how do they work? I mean, if they are focused on funding multiple organizations that do the same thing, then what they do is they're spreading that thin, and they're not focusing on, the achievement of those goals. So what we ask them to do is, don't keep funding organizations, 5 organizations that do the same thing. For us, we're the only emergency men's shelter in our county. And so, if somebody comes along and says, we want to be an emergency shelter, well, does that make sense for the funding sources to fund multiple organizations doing something, or do we focus that attention in somebody that's doing that right? And then you start lining up those organizations that do things really well and that aren't looking to duplicate each other. That way, all of your resources are more focused and more kind of produce higher results.
So I think this is a good transition. So let's go further into the Christian Center Rescue Ministry. So tell us exactly what the organization does.
Sure. We are the Christian Center Rescue Ministry was founded in 1955 by a gentleman named Lloyd Lambert. And his vision, he was coming out of World War II. He came back to his community. We were a prosperous factory town at that time. But he identified there were a lot of men in particular living on the street. And how do you begin helping them? He was a Christian pastor. And what he saw primarily more alcohol than drugs at that time. And how do we get these guys off the street and help them get their lives turned around? So he had an idea to start a men's shelter in his home. He moves his family to the basement, which I always wonder how that conversation went with his wife. And then he used the rest of the house to shelter men and begin that ministry, which then expanded again to larger spaces. And then they opened a soup kitchen and other things. So it is a ministry that's 67 years old. We're very proud to be standing on the shoulders of a great man like Lloyd Lambert and expanding the programming as we have through the years. Right now, we serve about 2,000 men, women, and children a year through our various services. And we're the only community dining room. We're the only soup kitchen in town that serves meals every single day, 3 meals a day. And we provide a men's shelter. We have a women's shelter called Willow Place. That's also the only emergency women's shelter in our community. And so we've offered multiple services through the years, so including the Elio Center.
Tell me a little bit more about the Elio Center.
Yeah, that's really exciting. What we did was a couple of years ago, we started just talking to our neighbors that live on the street, and we started hearing very, very similar stories. And we started, what are the things that are keeping you from moving your life forward? And I had a meeting or a chance encounter with a gentleman named Kevin. He had lived under a bridge about a quarter of a mile from our shelter, and he had a job interview that day. And he came to us and said, look, I have a job interview. And he was very excited to share this with me. And I asked him at that time, I said, when was the last time you showered? And he said it had been about 5 weeks. So we sent him up to our dorm and we got him showered and we got him clothing and everything. But that really got us thinking about all those obstacles to finding work and to getting better healthcare and things like that. So what we did was we just started meeting with the people. We would meet in their tents down by the river, and we would talk to people in their cars. And we set up something in our chapel where, as people lined up to eat, we would invite them in. And if they would just spend some time with me, telling me about their lives and about what they needed to move out of homelessness. I bought a bunch of $5 McDonald's gift cards. They would talk forever, telling me their stories. They were excited that somebody was interested in their lives. And as we began hearing those stories, we began hearing some very common themes. Access to shower and clean clothes was one, as we just mentioned. And what we find is that people who live on the street not only are less likely to get a job, but they're less likely to seek health care until they're very ill. And there's just so many things that are connected to that. Plus, it's just this dignity and this humanness that comes with a shower and just loving people that way. And so we developed the Elio Center. Elios is a Greek word. It means mercy and compassion, and it's used for the most needy. So we're very proud of that. And we love the name. And it's very fitting because it truly is the least of these. They come in, they can shower and wash their clothes. They can receive mail. Often we have people who aren't eligible for certain benefits without a mailing address, or they have to get an ID, or they have to get things, these little obstacles that keep them from moving forward. We want to be able to address those. So we address those issues. But we primarily, the most exciting part for us is the collaborative nature of it. So we have an organization that comes in that does a navigation. They help people get their insurance and their benefits and everything lined up so they can have greater access to healthcare and easier access to healthcare and the things that they need. We have an organization that comes in and does, they do HIV and AIDS testing every week. Every Tuesday. We work with the health department that parks their big mobile unit out in front, and they do cholesterol testing and blood pressure and all those things. They're also doing COVID vaccines and flu vaccines. And we just work a lot collaboratively with them. We also work with our local hospitals, Community Hospital of Anderson, St. Vincent Ascension Hospital here in Anderson, and Aspire Health here in Indiana. And we work with all of them on different counseling, on different things like this. So we're building that collaboration. We have a partner that does housing. We have a partner that does utility assistance. We have a partner that does employment. So we do those things, and we're lining that up. And what we did is we created this space that is free for them to come in and offer those services, because the ultimate goal is to find somebody, my friend Kevin living under the Truman Bridge, and moving him from living under the bridge to being in a house or a home with a job and better health care and just better outcomes.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And I love that you shared those examples of collaboration and what it can do. I guess just taking it a step further, like what makes for a good collaboration?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's getting everybody on the same page. So for us, we have to have the same issue. We've got to be able to fight the same issue. If you're seeing it, the problem you're solving as different problems, then you're never ever going to get exactly where you need to be. So it's kind of agreeing on, what's our goal going to be? What are our issues? What's the data tell us? What are we learning from our other partners about what the need is and how to address that need? So we begin there. We kind of get everybody on the same page. What is your shared goal? We talk to our clients. We talk to the people we serve. I don't mean to say this flippantly, but a lot of people think if you watch a Hallmark movie about homelessness, that's how you end homelessness. And that's just not really how it works. And it's kind of being in the trenches, understanding what those issues are. And then you want to identify what your strategies are. What are our key, how are we going to do it? So, okay, we've identified the problem. How do we address the problem? Because if you're doing it different ways, obviously you're going to use different methods at different times. But if everybody's just doing their own thing, then the systemic part of that begins to break down. We want to engage the people who do it well. So what we do is we reached out to our local hospitals who do things really, really well. And we reach out to our other local not-for-profits that do things really well. And we just begin talking to them. We begin talking to our funding sources and saying, how this is what we want to do. And this is how you can help us along. And then we just kind of organize. We have a calendar we develop so that we can move people through a system. Right now, we're still pretty early on in this. We're less than a year. We're seeing some real successes. The whole time you're fine tuning, you're reevaluating, you're figuring out what works better than others.
Yeah, and the strategy part of it sounds like it's really crucial because, for those that maybe haven't worked with the homeless population or don't maybe understand, I just kind of want to peel back maybe some of the things that you mentioned that we take for granted, right? If we're not in that situation, like having a place to get your mail. Like, well, if you need a driver's license, if they can't give it to you there, it has to be mailed or whatever the idea is or whatever the thing is for benefits or otherwise. If you don't have a place to get the mail, then what do you do? Right. Or like if you have that job interview, but you don't have a place to take a shower or you don't have access to clothes, like all of these barriers and hurdles. Maybe tell us a little bit more about like what that looks like.
Well, for us, a lot of times, in mentioning clothing, one of the things that we do when somebody first arrives, and a lot of times the entry for them is a shower. It's just the idea of taking a hot shower after maybe weeks or months of not having a shower. That's a great entry point for us. So they'll come in, they'll take a hot shower. My team over there is great. They do a great job. Somebody comes in as they're in the shower. What they do is they write down their sizes for all their clothing. And we go and get them clean clothes, new underwear, new socks, new those things. So as they come out of their hot shower, they've got clothes waiting for them. And then what they'll do is, the idea is you build trust. You're offering what you're offering, man. You're loving people and you're offering them dignity. And that's pretty amazing for a lot of people. So they get their shower. A lot of times it doesn't take long for them to come back. They're pretty hooked on that hot shower thing. They'll come back again and they'll bring clothing to wash or whatever. And then we're building that relationship. And then, you ask that question, why are you homeless? Why are you living in a tent? And what we discover is when you hear those stories, it's pretty broad ranging. But a lot of times people are stuck here. They came here for a job. They rode down with a friend. They found themselves homeless. And, how do we figure out where do you belong? The other day, a gentleman said, I came up with a friend from Tennessee and, he met a girl, took off, and I'm here. I don't have a vehicle. I don't have any money. I don't have a job. I'm just hanging out. So what do you need? Well, I need to go to Tennessee. Great. Let us figure that out. We're going to get you back to Tennessee. So those are the things that we begin to evaluate. A lot of times they need access to a psychosocial evaluation or some kind of mental health. A lot of times there are just a lot of obstacles. And what we do is that we plug them into those services. They'll say, look, a lot of times I can't get a job without an identification, and I can't get an identification because I live in a tent down by the river. And so we figure that out. We have the paperwork available there. We have a young lady on our staff. Her name is Billie Ellis. She does a tremendous job of getting that paperwork done, getting it submitted. and then it's mailed right back there to us. So then they get the ID. So it's what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? Because if we start off by going, oh, we're going to put you in a house right away, that has a higher failure rate than if we kind of begin putting those pieces together one at a time.
Mm. Makes total sense. So Rob, I mean, I know a lot going on at the center, at the ministries, and a big issue that you're tackling. I just have to ask, like what's next? I mean, what's next for yourself? What's next for the ministries? The collaborations, like what's on the agenda?
Yeah, we are. It's interesting. Tonight, as a matter of fact, our community has had some ongoing dialogue about the Recovery Act money that's available in our community, and how that's to be spent. Our city government's going to have one opinion. Our not-for-profits are going to have another idea. Different organizations are going to feel differently. It's that piece of the collaboration that we think is really important, because it's not just government, it's police, it's fire. I mean, it's just the hospitals, the other not-for-profits, the for-profits, the people who do business in a community where homelessness may affect their business. And it's just everybody at the table and decided on that. So really for us, the next step is we're going to figure out how to spend some new resources that have come into our community via the government, and how we do that collaboratively. And I'm really, really hoping, in fact, I'm really hoping some of those people are watching right now, because we need to get a plan together that does not include being too frivolous with this. This is a really great shot to really change the face of our community. So that's it. We do, we do a couple of fundraisers a year. We have Walk a Mile in My Shoes coming up, and we're always looking to raise resources, because what we do is we're trying to create an environment where our partners can join and they can have skin in the game, but also how do we make that fertile soil for them to be successful as well? So we're always doing some fundraising and that kind of thing, and just planning. I mean, it's just as these things begin to expand, and as our collaborations begin to sort of deepen, and because you're always playing with the model, you're always kind of figuring out what's the best practice and that kind of thing. We continue to tinker with that as we add partners and continue to move the ball down the field. So that's where we're at.
So if somebody's watching this and they want to learn more, or they want to get involved and they want to help, whether it's time, whether it's, again, the check writers, just in general, if somebody wants to help and follow the journey, like what's the best way for people to do that?
Adam, that's a great question. Listen, we're always looking for financial resources. We're looking for people in our community who are willing to just reach out and say, I love the plan. I love the idea. How do we collaborate? So we would love that. People can reach out to us. Our website is thechristiancenter.org. If they want to donate, it's thechristiancenter.org/donate. We'd love that. We would really love those resources. People locally who might want to help with the walk could also reach out to that through our social media page, the Christian Center Anderson. We're in Anderson, Indiana. And just local, doing food drives. Anybody wants to reach out and to talk to me about collaborations, it's Spaulding at thechristiancenter.org. I'd love to talk to you and see how we can make some things work in your community as well. Local people, Indiana people, or outside, you have some ideas on how we can collaborate. Let's have this one goal in mind of ending homelessness in this community. And reach out. 765-649-4264 is our number, and love to hear from you.
And for everybody watching this, we'll put all that information in the show notes so that you can just click on the website, head right on over, and go check it out. So we definitely want you to do that. And awesome. If this is your first time with Mission Matters as a platform, just so you know, we're all about bringing on entrepreneurs, experts, community leaders, people that are out there that have a mission, that they have some type of change they're trying to affect, and something really to give back to the world. If that is the type of content that you like and that you're into, we definitely welcome you to hit that subscribe button, because we have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. Rob, it has really been a pleasure having you on the show and learning more about your background and really all the great things that you're doing at the ministry. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Adam. It's been great. I appreciate you. And thanks for having me.